Hi, everybody. Good morning and welcome back to the Brian Eskow Show. Such a pleasure to be with you. Not such a pleasure to be cutting this intro twice. Little internet connection. I thought it might have been war related, but I restarted the modem, and the Wi-Fi came back. So I used in the interim, I used my hotspot to record a quick intro, and it was completely blurry and completely visually untenable. So no, so I reset my modem and the Wi-Fi came back up. So have not been dragged into the conflict, thank God. I mean, I'm using a little humor to shed a little to um, just as a defense mechanism because I'm worried. Not to say that I don't support the president and the administration or the actions, but it's an intense time. We are at war. I'm a little freaking nervous, about blowback. And so it's an intense time, and I'm praying for our troops and our country and the people of Iran and the president and the administration. I hope you'll join me in that. It's an intense time. So, using a little humor there, have not been drawn into the conflict. It appears to have just been a faulty modem. But you never know, what hybrid and lone wolf attacks will look like. But I think it's safe to say that my internet modem is safe, at least for now. So, welcome back. The reason I'm doing an intro is just to basically say, hey, look, on Sunday I put out what I think, and I'm sticking to calling it the most important episode in 5 years of podcasting. This is a podcast about my search for political identity and understanding and defeating tribalism, not to take a both sides approach, not to ultimately sit on the fence. No, one of the key plot points of my journey has been becoming a Trump supporter and being firm in that and hardening my position, if anything, but not to the point where I become tribalistic. So right now, I just want to say, hey, I really hope you enjoy the episode that I did on Sunday. I covered psychologist Dr. Roy Baumeister's, I think it's called the cultural animal theory. Well, more precisely, I should say, for several weeks in other episodes, I had been covering his cultural animal theory. But on Sunday, I did an hour long episode on the political behavior component of his cultural animal theory. So I actually don't know if the political behavior lecture is part of the cultural animal theory. I would assume it is because it's part of this 8 lecture series course on the Peterson Academy called this Big Ideas of Psychology 101. So I think they're connected. The cultural animal theory, which was the first 6 lectures, seventh lecture was the political behavior, human political behavior, which I just gave to you. And then the 8th one, I actually don't know what that's about. So I'll listen to that this week. But we're traveling to LA. Alexa has some paperwork to do at the French consulate. She's part French. And so we'll be up there spending some time, and I won't be around to do an episode this weekend. So I'm releasing the next episode, this episode today on Wednesday. And I haven't done an separate introduction in years, but I have done it over the years a handful of times. And I think this is one of those cases just to say, hey, look, that was a profound episode for me that I did. I hope you like it. It kind of took me back away from the tribalism. And now I'm going back into this. Here's Ken Good, an expert lawyer from Texas, who's very much against the progressives who have been pushing for bail reform. He very much supports the private bail system. And you're going to hear why. And so it's not tribal. It's not tribal to host someone who's a partisan, even if that's not the right word to call Ken. He's an advocate, a partisan, an advocate, an activist, whatever. Someone who has a strong feeling, and guess what? It's not in the middle. It's okay, and that's fine. You have to talk to people, but I don't want you to feel like it's jarring to go, oh, Eskow, are you trying to be neutral and kumbaya, and then you have some partisan on? No, no, no. I'm a Trump supporter. I'm going through my journey. I'm still interested in talking to people from diverse backgrounds. Ken happened to have contacted me. We happened to have scheduled the interview for Monday. And it just so happened that the day before I published the Baumeister episode. So I just wanted to set the tone a little bit in regards to the pacing and what you can expect from the show. Just more of the same, guys. Just expect more introspection on my part, hopefully honest introspection in solo episodes, and more talking to just about anyone. I talked about that's the thing with podcast hosts. You got to be careful. You got to be careful the decisions you make on who you let on can haunt you. And so you want to cast a wide net and talk to anybody, but at the same time, you got to understand that even a little rinky-dink mid-tier podcast host, it could get a million views, and the next thing you know, you've got some bad association. So it's an interesting. It's not a quagmire, but even Joe Schmo with a podcast like this should really think twice. This reminds me of related, not exactly on point, but I told you a few weeks ago I hosted that guy who's previously the prime minister of a government in exile, and currently the foreign minister of a government in exile. I was like, you know what? I talked to him for an hour and 30 minutes. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to get shot in the head when I'm traveling. I'm not posting it. I didn't post it. So you got to choose. Very interesting. But anyway, I'm happy to be with you. It's an honor to do this podcast. Praying for everyone in these intense times. They're scary for civilians. They're scary for civilians. Hell yeah, they are. And I guess, and I've got it good. Once again, Brian Eskow has it good. And so I'm trying to, from my lap of luxury, no wars, no drones, internet's working, got my breakfast, got my espresso machine. I'm trying to operate in good faith and not bring people together to agree, but maybe to agree to disagree, like Baumeister said. Can we get to a point where we say, you know what? You think that way, I think this way, but we do share something in common, this culture of freedom of expression, and that's good. And so let's respect each other, disagree, understand we're all human. Now, the thing is, though, at the end of the day, you do have to pick a side. And, not everyone can be a social scientist, psychologist giving lectures about, how both sides are important to a healthy society. I mean, both sides is not really ever going to get you elected. So you have to choose, but it's that balance of playing politics, standing up for what you believe in, not demonizing other people, and making it all work. It's like threading a needle, I suppose. And Trump has a way of doing it, and a lot of people don't like him because they think he fails miserably at that. And that's an interesting. Let's explore that another time. Is Trump guilty of? Well, look, we know Trump is provocative. We know the media is provocative. So he's a guy. He plays it. He does it his way. He does it his way. So maybe that's one of the things that I wouldn't want to mirror of Trump. I think, oh, I like Trump so much. There's so much you can learn from Trump. Yes, but not everything. So don't think I'm just some panty sniffer for Trump. Like, I like the guy a lot. I'm a fan. I'm a supporter. I am proud that I voted for him. And if we get through this war, if it works out the way him and his administration wanted to, if we get through it with no serious repercussions on our end, well, then, yeah, I'll be standing by all that. If we don't, well, what have I said before? If the economy at the end of his second term is just dog shit, have to judge him on it. If we get nuked, have to judge him on it. If I'm dead looking down from heaven going, fuck, my podcast was just about to take off, but I got nuked because I voted for Trump, I'm going to have to judge him on that. If there's some other insanely serious, like another 9/11 type attack, right, as a result of what we're doing in Iran, these types of things would obviously cause you to reconsider. Short of any of them happening, I don't see myself reversing course. I like Trump, and I'm not going to go into some long dissertation now. Stay tuned. I do it every week about why I voted for Trump, what I think he represents. I mean, shit, I did it last week. So go check out that episode if you haven't already. But it's a pleasure to be with you. And as for this episode, I would say it took us a few minutes to get into a rhythm of flow. It was cold. We didn't really know each other. That's with 90% of my guests, I suppose. But in this case, I think it took us 10 minutes to get into a rhythm. But once we did, it became a very good conversation. I think anyone interested in hearing what is the conservative position on bail? Why do they fight for it? Why does Elon Musk believe it? And me playing the devil's advocate, what is the progressive take? Why is Grok taking, I mean, this is how we started it. He didn't like it, but I mentioned Grok in the opening sentence, and we ended up kind of coming back to that throughout the conversation. It ended up being a nice little anchor. So I think you'll like it. I hope you do. Sorry for this long-winded introduction. And if you're a fan of this podcast, I encourage you to tell everyone about it. Just go into work today, and first thing, just run into his office, and you got to listen to this podcast. Don't do that. You will be fired immediately. So I need my audience to be employed so that they can eventually give me money. Okay, that's the plan here, to just eventually get money from you. No, just kidding. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I'm verbose. Without further ado, Ken Good. Ken Good, welcome to the program. Nice to meet you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I was talking to Grok for a few minutes about bail reform policy. So in the last few minutes, getting myself up to speed, preparing. But it's amazing how AI can do that, right? You can just, immerse yourself and instantly. I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but hopefully we'll have a good conversation. But it can very quickly enable you to ask questions.
Well, and I think Grok is better than like Google AI. I think Google is more of a news aggregator. So, the activist groups flood Google with pseudoscience reports. So if you ask, Google AI, it's going to just spit back that, and whether it's true or not. So I've heard Grok is
interesting.
Better.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm glad you mentioned that, because when we get there in the conversation, I will mention that Grok has an interesting angle as well. So I'm looking forward to getting into the topic of this topic with you. But first, tell me a little bit about yourself, Ben. Have you done many podcasts?
I've done a lot, and I have my own podcast. I always like to start by saying I am married to a wonderful woman. We have 2 kids. We're both lawyers, so so we have that going for us, or going against us. My wife is a staff attorney for a federal magistrate judge here in Tyler, where we live. So, in fact, she came to Tyler for that job, and we met on a blind date.
Cool.
And so we got married here, and we've had 2 kids here. They've grown up. In fact, our oldest is getting married in June. So
congratulations on all
circle.
That. Amazing.
I came to Tyler in 1989 when I finished law school. I started out representing.
You were born.
Oh my gosh! Well, now I just like you.
We're connecting, though. Teach me.
Hey, I just turned 65 yesterday. So
you look good, man. Really?
Oh, well, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But I've been working really hard to. I've lost 22 pounds. I've been working really hard, and I've done it.
You look great.
I've done it the old-fashioned way. So I've just worked hard, worked on the treadmill, worked out. No drugs. So because my goal is to try to keep it off, but my original goal was to lose weight before the wedding in June. I was like, well, I'm so ahead of schedule, I've got time to put it all back on. But
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Good luck keeping it off.
We'll see. But I've been an attorney for over 30, almost 35 years. So maybe 36 now. But I started out representing doctors and hospitals when they got sued. I was on court TV as a young attorney. I argued my first case at the Supreme Court of Texas when I was out of law school 4 years. So I've always had a legal mind. On our trial teams, I was the legal eagle. And then I started kind of getting pulled into this bail world, representing bondsmen, insurance companies, getting people licensed. And then I went to a hearing in Houston on the O'Donnell case. And I just came out of it very upset because the judge I thought was just wrong on the law.
What's the O'Donnell case?
At one point, it was the most important case nationwide on bail reform. It was out of Houston, Texas, out of Harris County. And the judge forced through some reforms through a consent decree, but she kept entering preliminary injunctions, and they'd go up to the Fifth Circuit and they get reversed. But in the meantime, it was being cited nationwide as, bail, or the private industry bail system is ultimately going to be found unconstitutional.
About what year is this?
Oh, let's see. This is I would say in the last 5 or 6 years. But the problem is, ultimately, the case kept getting reversed, and the Fifth Circuit ultimately held that the case should have never been filed in state court. I mean, in federal court. So she got reversed 6, 7, 8, or even more times than that. And but then they ended up entering into a settlement, giving the plaintiffs everything they wanted, contrary to what the Fifth Circuit was ruling. So it kind of did bail reform on misdemeanors, and so I decided, we kind of have to be an expert. We have to get to the point where we can be experts on these issues, because no one else is going to tell our side of the story or even get close to it. Because I thought the judge was completely wrong, and I think I've been proven correct because she kept getting reversed. I've written articles across the country since then
What was your
on bail
argument
reform.
in that specific case?
Well, see, her argument was there was like 3 main points. The first point, you're making me have to really think. The first point was
Well, you
that,
don't necessarily have to do all that.
oh no,
So
well,
if
it's the
I mean,
legal
so-
stuff. I love that. But there was
good.
a concept called younger abstention, where this is a state court concept. So the federal court should decline to address it, and she said no, that doesn't apply. The Fifth Circuit ultimately said it does apply, and the court should not have gotten involved. She also argued that the misdemeanor judges were not state actors because they worked for the county, but then the Fifth Circuit ultimately ruled that any judge setting bail is a state actor in the state of Texas, or is a state actor. So that was the 2 biggest rulings, because there was a 1983 case where you can't sue a state actor under 1983. So she allowed the plaintiffs to sue because she found that the misdemeanor judges were county actors. Well, that went away, but it went away in a different case. So it was upheld in her case when it went up to the Court of Appeals, but in a subsequent proceeding called Davis versus Dallas County, the Fifth Circuit decided to reconsider their ruling in her case and then reversed it. And so a lot of what happened in Harris County would never happen again today, because of the rulings that were made by the Fifth Circuit in her case and then afterwards.
So you're telling me the story of bail reform.
Well, I'm telling you, we're probably one county, in Harris County, which then was cited nationwide. The arguments that were being made is that, the whatever they were doing in Harris County violated due process and equal protection. So that's the arguments they make nationwide. And there was an article in the Dallas Morning News.
So hold on, let's help me understand, because the audience, might not necessarily know where we are, exactly what we're talking about. You're basically just telling me the main case that challenged the constitutionality of, you calling it a private bail system? Is that what you call it, a private?
Well, the private industry, the private bail system, saying that that's unconstitutional, but it's now been held constitutional 3 times.
Right. So you're saying the argument in this case was an equal protections claim, and it's something about poverty, I would think?
It's due process proceed. No, in that specific case, Harris County at the time used a bail schedule. So when you come before a magistrate judge, they would look at your crime and look at the schedule, and then look at you have a criminal history go up, and then that's what they would set your bail. And then, but they wouldn't give the defendant the opportunity to say, "Hey, I can't afford that. I'm too poor," because they would say, "You can't talk. If anything you say can be used against you." And so because they didn't have an opportunity to say, "Hey, I'm poor," that violated procedural due process. Well, the county the judges were always willing to fix that, but the plaintiffs used that issue and then said, "Well, we want all these, we don't want a procedural fix. We want you to require them not to use the private surety bail system at all for almost all offenses, for misdemeanors," and they wouldn't settle to fix the issue that they had pointed out. And ultimately, that was what got it reversed a lot, because I think the Fifth Circuit ultimately said, when you find a procedural error or a procedural violation, then the remedy has to be procedural. So they were arguing they wanted a substantive remedy, but the court said, no, you get a procedural remedy. You get a hearing where you get a right to say, "Hey, I can't afford that." And that's,
so
they wanted a lot more.
But is this, in a nutshell, obviously there's much to discuss, but is that in a nutshell kind of where it's at? I noticed in our latest communication in setting up this interview, it kind of seemed like the narrative around bail reform currently is it's trending back towards what you would consider more reasonable. So is that kind of it, the trajectory of the case law? Is that
Well,
the big
I would
picture?
say that they've been using the case law as a hammer, but the courts have now ruled that the private bail system is constitutional. So all these arguments that say we have to change it because it's going to be held unconstitutional have now been rejected by the courts. So their whole argument for why we need to change is gone. And so now we can go back to addressing why they want changes. They want more equity, even if it means more crime. And I think the public, by and large, wants there to be less crime.
Okay, so interesting. So where we're at is you've been fighting it, you've been in the fight, and you're winning in court, it sounds like. And now,
Winning at the court and the legislature, and where they've enacted bail reform, they're rolling it back. So we're actually on the where if you were looking at the pendulum, it swung left, and when Trump was elected, it started the second time. It started swinging back to the right, and that's where we are.
interesting. And so back to Grok, it did say, I like Grok as well, but it did say, that there wasn't really a statistical evidence of eliminating the bail system resulting in increase in crime.
Oh,
You
wow,
must have a
wow.
different, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the reason why that Gronk says that is because the activist groups have figured out that if they flood Google, flood the
mm,
internet with pseudo studies, which are just their own little pieces of crap, that's what'll get spit back, and so it'll be hard. It's hard to find the real studies. The best example I can give you is I did a podcast about this where the activists say we need to defund the police, and when we defund the police, then we'll be safer. But there's been studies on this for a long time, and they did a study in where was it in Oregon or in the West Coast when they
right,
after
Portland or something, yeah,
Portland when George Floyd
Chaz or something, yeah,
passed away, and
yeah,
yes,
the
and
autonomous zone or something,
yes, the autonomous zone, and they found out when you get rid of the police, crime goes up. It goes up substantially. I mean, in the autonomous zone, 75%. In the 2 block area around it, 50%, and even in the whole precinct, 25%. So, and then what goes up most most quickly is murder, and so the science says the exact opposite, but the activists still argue to this day we need to defund the police and we'll be safer. There's no basis for that. In fact,
well,
the science
yeah.
is the opposite.
Yeah, my personal leaning is much more to the right these days. I had a personal journey studying critical race theory in law school myself in 21 and 22. In my final year, took some CRT electives, jurisprudence infused CRT, followed by a course called discrimination and diversity law. A great professor, but it was like world changing, provocative, and set
Give
me
me
on
a
this path.
2-minute summary of what you're being taught. You were taught as on critical race theory.
That American society, although it's equal, the Civil Rights Act is in effect on paper, in effect in the streets. We do not have a colorblind society. We do still have a system of racial injustice. Therefore, it needs to be transformed to be more inclusive of all outsiders. So the argument is you have a dominant a cultural hegemony, and the white straight male perspective is embedded in the culture, despite everything, all the progress, and that you have to take any means necessary to radically transform that structure into something that is no longer an identity, what it was, into something that accommodates all viewpoints. So in jurisprudence and practice, here's the little formula a justice would use to make sure that the outsider perspective gets infused in the opinion, so it's in the law. So it's all about outsider insider dichotomy, hegemony, and correcting that, right? And that's where
Isn't it interesting? I mean, when you try to apply that to the criminal justice system, you got a lot of problems. I mean, just applying it to business alone, you've got a lot of problems because that implies or that assumes that anyone can do the job.
Oh, I
where
had tons
our
of problems with it for a minute.
with our I mean, for the business perspective, we should always hire the best person.
Right.
Now we can argue about how we get there, but that's not what critical race theory is. We need to know what the demographic makeup of all of our employees are, and we need to disperse it. And so, I mean, it's kind of like the old post office test where you get extra points for this, you get extra points for that, and so then it's not really based upon who's the best qualified employee or applicant. It's based on who got the higher
that
score.
Comes into play. And
but I would say in business, it's been proven that that has hurt businesses as their productivity goes down because they're spending too much time dealing with those types of issues instead of making money.
Well, you would think naturally that makes sense. Although, you also hear that diversity on teams is a good thing. And I'm sure that's true. Okay. But you have affirmative action very much working. So you have critical race theory falling into a category of 4 different things for race relations. One being traditionalism. This is the typical Republican, the MAGA. Civil Rights Act did it, giving the good faith view of MAGA. Civil Rights Act did its thing, and we're good. So just live in the moment and live in this great country where we're all free and be free. And no reparations, not for a second, no affirmative action. This is a beautiful, just, fair system for all who work hard. So go ahead and do it. Traditionalism. Then you have reformist, which is, we want to get there and we want to be there. We're almost there, but tinker around the edges, maybe a little affirmative action until we're there and then get rid of it. Then you have CRT, which is radical transformation by any means necessary to reform that structure. And then
what if it doesn't need to be reformed?
Well, I didn't think it did, and that's why. And so for me, I started to identify as like Ted Cruz, and that's how I went on my journey. And I was saying, I agree with you. I agree with you that I don't want to defund the police, and so it makes sense to me. So I'm with you.
Well, and this look at
when you see the stabbings of the poor woman on the train, you see it's technically anecdotal, I suppose, but everything is screaming. This makes sense to keep strict policies in place.
Well, I mean, so then when you apply that kind of theory to the criminal justice system, then it rejects the premise that different races commit crimes in different percentages.
It rejects the premise of autonomy and equality. And that was my problem with it.
It does reject that.
There are cultural differences. There are, and I'll let you go. I'll let you run with it. But yeah, I think there are cultural, I was just reading a psychology lecture, or listening, and it was actually saying, believe it or not, stereotypes are mostly accurate. Not when it comes to politics, interestingly. But so there is such a thing as cultural values and cultural identity. We don't live in a colorless world, but I think the system is good, is all I say.
Well, the state of Minnesota started tracking just a couple of years ago, tracking race. They've always tracked race on arrests, but they started going all the way down to the race of the person reporting the crime. And I mean, the information that came from that was just incredible. I mean, there was a 10-to-1 disproportionate amount of crime being reported by, one minority group, and the people reporting the crimes was the same minority group, because by and large we commit crime within our same socioeconomic and our same groups. But once that group got into the criminal justice system, their results were better than the rest of the demographics, and it was because of that. The premise is that they're being mistreated and they're not being treated fairly, and so they must be given a better result in the criminal justice system, which they were, but they were going into the system 10 times numbers over other racial groups.
Yeah, well, so tell me if this is what you're saying, because it is certainly the case with this view, the CRT, which is affirmative action on steroids, which is reformism on steroids, is a good way to think of it. CRT will say, it'll look at the data and say, okay, that's evidence of discrimination rather than evidence of a problem in a particular community.
Yes, I agree with that. They will say that is evidence of systemic racism, and I don't think so. I think there's a whole bunch of studies and there's a whole bunch of research and studies that show that we have crime being committed in disproportionate numbers in certain minority groups. And there's a reason for that. I mean, historically in our society, we have discounted crime by certain minority groups as long as they were committing that crime on their same minority group. So we didn't care.
Interesting.
And especially in,
Hmm.
the South. But one of the first DAs when I came to town, he was elected with high margins of winning because he was colorblind. So if it was black on black crime, brown on brown crime, he treated it like it was a white on white crime. And so he was at the time he was very much appreciated for doing that. And I think that today, I'm not sure that would happen. I think that would be seen as, oh, you're mistreating the minority groups because you're holding them to a high standard. And that's the problem I have is, because I think the number one indicator of how you're going to act in the future is how you've acted in the past. And so I think the number one bail reform we need, and Texas is enacted, is a requirement that judges review criminal histories, because if they have a long criminal history, that's a good indicator that they're going to be a continuing problem in the criminal justice system. But critical race theory people would say, oh, we should not look at criminal histories because historically certain minority groups have higher arrest. We're going to disregard and we're going to reject that it's because a disproportionate amount of crime is being committed and they're committed against their own racial groups. And we're really telling those racial groups that they can't be safe. They don't have a right to be safe because they have to put up with more crime. And I reject all that.
As do I. I think you have to be rational. To me, that's what MAGA is. That's what Trump is. It's just purely rational and common sense and straightforward.
I mean, I'd love to hear you say that, because the problem is, how many people that we talk to every day would say they're not common sense, they're not rational? Absolutely they are.
Well, you do have the woke right, which, is an interesting phenomenon, but I've always said it's like maybe 5% of the right, whereas the critical race theory embracing people are much more closer to like 20%, if not more, on the left. And so they're not exactly mirror images of each other, but they're very
the way I look at it is the activists on the left are out there crazy, and the activists on the right just want to be safe, and so they're not on the same level at all.
Yeah.
Well, but the problem here's the way I explain it: the people on the far left, the activists, never admit they're wrong, so they won't tell you, well, what we've been doing for the last 5 years, 6 years hasn't worked. They'll just say we need more time, or they'll
I know what you mean.
They'll say, well, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to have a more equitable system, so they don't care if there was more crime.
Right.
And then they'll cook the books on their little articles to say, well, crime is not up because of these reforms. And if you look in their articles, they're saying, well, we released 20% more people, and so crime went up 20% for those people, but on a proportionate basis, it's the same amount of crime. So they're saying in their argument, crime didn't go up, but you look at it and you go, crime did go up because you released more criminals. You're just, you're cooking the books on the numbers.
Yeah. Like common sense. And again, you see those videos and you hear the story of this guy, and it's a bail story ultimately at heart. And you go, how could it be that he was out on? So tell me about bail and why it's good.
Okay. So, no one likes the private bail industry. And so, it's not something people just stand up for, but there's a reason why it's been around for 200 years. And it's because the private bail industry does something that's so much better than anybody else. And even Gronk doesn't see it because nobody's publishing that information.
I could ask you one clarifying question, and it might blow its mind and change its tune.
Well, yeah, that's true. So like the private industry has like less than a 10% failure to appear rate. So on 1,000 people, 900 people are going to show up for court. Cash bonds, where you put up the full amount of the bond in cash with the court, they have twice the failure to appear rate of the private industry or higher. But when you get to these simple release mechanisms, they're called different things in different places, but they're all just my promise that I will come back. So New York calls it release on no bond. California, release on zero bail. Texas would call it release on a personal bond. It may even have an amount, but it's just your personal promise. And the failure to appear rates on those are just 50, 60, 70, 80%. And so if you can imagine 1,000 people where 800 people don't show up for court, you're on average, you have the same number of arrests every week, every month, because you arrest about the same number of people every year. And so when more and more people don't show up, that causes backlogs. Backlogs put pressure on courts to dismiss cases because there's very few ways to handle backlogs. And when you start dismissing cases, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime.
So you definitely think that there's a real, do you feel the rise in your line of work? Do you see it?
Yeah, for the last couple of years, I think that was before the election for Trump. There was a big debate about whether crime was going up or not. And all these activist groups were saying, they were writing articles saying, don't believe your eyes, believe us. And we're telling you that crime is not going up because of reform. But they would also say, but you don't have to just believe us. Look at the FBI statistics. The FBI statistics say crime is down. Well, I think in October of last year, I wrote an article saying, here's all the reasons why that conclusion is not true. And, the FBI was changing over to a new system. You had to have equipment to report the new statistics for them to be gathered. The two largest police groups in the country weren't reporting yet. And so I was saying that, the data was incomplete, and there was a lot of scientists saying the data is incomplete, so you can't rely upon that saying crime is down. Well, 10 days later, after I wrote that article, their statistics were updated, and suddenly it was showing crime was increasing. And so at that point, if you remember in the election, crime was a big issue until October. And in October, the activists stopped talking about crime at all, and they just started calling Trump Hitler, Trump a fascist. And it's because the new FBI statistics came out and they couldn't talk about crime anymore.
That's right.
And so I think when you add the crime and the immigration issue, we had a backlash on all that with Trump 2.0's election. And so we're kind of repeating the same cycle we did in the 60s. In the 60s, we felt safe. We were more forgiving on our criminal laws. Crime started going up. And then we had a disagreement on how to address it. One side of the political spectrum refused to participate. So there was a backlash. We got Reagan and Reagan's war on drugs. We're essentially doing the same thing now. Crime has been going up, and the activists have refused to participate. They've even refused to admit that crime is going up or that what their reforms are the problem. And so now we've got Trump. Not totally because of crime, but because of crime, immigration, and several other issues.
But yeah, no, partially the law and order message, man, the whole thing, it's definitely part and parcel.
Yeah, we need one more election, though. We need one more law and order election for a reset on the left, because both parties have historically been law and order parties, and they still won't admit right now that crime is going up. So we need one more law and order election, and then they'll reset.
So are there any policies, are there any rooms for improvement? Like, what would a reasonable reform look like? Or is it, we don't need a reform?
Well, I'm going to probably shock you and say there's not a compromise with the activists, because they won't even admit when something's not working. And you can't really compromise with that. But there's always ways to improve the system. And anything that improves the system, I would argue, is good for the private bail industry, because they're so intertwined. I mean, like in Texas, the private industry bail system is probably responsible for 83 to 86% of all releases in the state. So, I mean, the private bail system is very closely intertwined with the criminal justice system. So, I mean, the way they've been improving it in Texas is they have limited the use of personal or simple release. So if you're charged with violent offense, you're not eligible for a personal bond in Texas. So I think that helps.
So improving it is strengthening it, because it's a good thing. That's the
yes. Yeah, I think so. And when you look at like Illinois with what they've done with completely throwing out their bail system, really, their crime, I mean, the Cook County clerk did a report saying that their failures to appear are like 75%. And the activist response to that is just, oh, that can't be true. That can't be true. Well, it's like, do you know how many jurisdictions we have stats like that now? I mean, Houston, Texas, the Houston Police Officers Union did a 1-week review of all the misdemeanor dockets that were using simple release and found a 75% failure to appear. Harris County Court Watch, which is a website, then applied those formulas to 2 years worth of data from the district clerk's office and found an average 83% failure to appear rate. I did a podcast with the DA in California, and he said they use that for all misdemeanors, and that has an 80% failure to appear rate. And so, I mean, it's not just, a one-off in Cook County. These are starting to be the statistics that are coming out, and the activists just call it all wrong, call it liars, and it's just because they can't admit that these experiments that they've been asking states to do have been destructive.
I see. So the spread is really what it's all about. It's just the gap. The numbers speak for themselves, and the assumption is, like you said earlier, the best indicator of what you've done before or what you'll do next is what you've done before. Put those two together, and that's the argument for there's obviously more crime. And so
but I would even say the backlash against these bail reform activists has been more preventative detention. So less use of the bail system and just holding people in jail.
Right.
And so I'm critical of that because on the far left, just releasing everybody is never going to be sustainable. The public's not going to stand for it because they want to feel safe. And as crime goes up, they say enough. But on the other hand, when you're putting everybody in jail and you're holding more and more people until their crimes are go to trial, that costs a lot of money, and the public's not going to pay for that. So, I mean, whether people acknowledge it or not, the backlash is as a result of the activists. And now the middle ground is more use of the private industry. And if we would if the activists would have used accountability, give everybody a chance, but if they screwed up, hold them accountable, then it would have worked for a lot longer. And if we would give people a chance, if they're going to be held, give them a chance first. And if they don't do it, then hold them accountable and hold them. That would be cheaper for the public. So the middle ground is to use the private industry more, and that's not going to happen on the far left.
Interesting. And there's no argument that I'm just purely asking that it really is unfair to poor people.
No, I mean that is the what do I call that? That is the talking point that's been tested by
I think it's
groups testing. It's a talking point. Yeah. But the problem is that's the reason why we offer the simple release as the protection against first-time offenders who are poor. Because if you're not a first-time offender and you have a long criminal history, you're not and they set bail an amount you can't afford. You're not in jail because you're poor. You're in jail because you have a criminal history. And I think there's some statistics that even Trump cited in his executive order from Yolo County, California. They kept all their data during COVID. And so they compared two people on nonviolent offenses released, one simple release just on their promise, other released on private surety bail bond. And the study found that the person that just had simple release had a 200% greater chance of being arrested for a new violent offense in the next 18 months compared to someone released on a private surety bail. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But, I mean, if you're a family member for someone, I wouldn't want anybody in my family released on simple release if they've got a 200% greater chance of committing a new violent offense in the next 18 months. And now their situation is a lot worse, where they were facing a misdemeanor nonviolent. Now they've got that plus a violent offense. I wouldn't want any of my family members released simply.
That's an extremely interesting way to look at it. Yeah, it's about what's good for society, and it's the idea of being overly compassionate. The influencers call it toxic empathy, right? Or
yes, and people take advantage of it, and then and they take advantage of it until they commit a bad felony. Now they're in a worse position because they're probably guaranteed to go to prison for a while.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where this storyline develops. Will the left acknowledge that the
Will they
data is?
correct? I don't. It's going to depend on the midterm elections. Um, these soft on crime DAs have a short shelf life. They've got 1-2 terms and that's it, and they're being replaced by law and order DAs. So those are self correcting, and so I think that will continue. But they still keep trying to elect soft on crime DAs.
Yeah, I gotta say, I nothing about it makes sense to me, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all part of the reason I've drifted away from the left. It just doesn't seem to make sense. I'm sensitive. I'm a very sensitive person. I want, I feel bad for people, all of that. Um, Perhaps more so than the average person. But then again, that's arrogant and ignorant to say, right? So that's just the leftist in me saying, I'm more compassionate than you.
Yeah, but okay, so there's compassionate and then there's law and order. We've got to feel safe. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the biggest problem in our criminal justice system, the one that we have no idea how to address, is mental health in the
Mm-hmm.
criminal justice system. I mean, that is if we could figure out how to address that, you and I could be billionaires.
Has that exploded mental health from what you understand, or is it a new phenomenon?
No, we used to have a system of mental health facilities in the country, state and federal, and then I think, was it
Reagan
Reagan?
screwed that
Reagan
up, right?
closed the federal,
Yeah.
but then over time the state systems got closed as well. Number one, they don't have a natural constituency, and so anytime they had a budget crunch, they would cut the budget for the
Oh,
state
because
mental
they
health
had no one
facility.
rooting for them.
And so, I mean, there were stories of people starving to death, or they didn't get their medications because they couldn't
That's
afford to buy them.
brutal. That's
And
brutal.
so there was a lot of class action lawsuits filed across the country. And that's how the state facilities ended up closing. But we've moved all that to our prison jail system. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those are our largest mental health facilities in the country.
What do you think we
And
should do about all that?
well, but here's the problem with the bail reform. We've said, oh, we don't want those people in jail, so we're just going to say, oh, well, let's just dismiss their criminal case because they've got a mental
Streets.
problem. And so they get arrested, they go into jail, they get on their meds, they get controllable. We dismiss their case, we take them out of jail, they get off their meds, they get uncontrollable. So we've created a revolving door.
And they stab someone on the neck.
And then when they commit a substantial crime, like they stab somebody on the neck, then we hold them because now it's a crime that the public demands that they be held. And so
and Elon Musk calls you out, and the whole Twitterverse is going,
yeah.
What are you doing, idiots?
Yes. Well, and the solution for that is, I mean, I don't know if there is a solution. There's not a solution that's cheaper than putting them in the jails because, I mean, we have the prison space. One of the reasons why we have so many people in prison is because that's where we're housing our mental health patients a lot of times now when they commit crime. So, and the problem is alternatives to that are very expensive and the facilities are very expensive to build. And so, and the biggest problem I have with the whole mental health is like when criminals figure it out. So right now in this bail reform movement, we're going to use it as a King's X to dismiss the criminal case. Well, who's going to learn that? The quickest is the career criminals. They're going to, I have a mental health problem. Well, mental health people are trained. They have to support. They take what they say at face value. They don't contradict it. So if the career criminal says, I got a mental health problem, they're supportive of it. Nobody triages it to say
second order impacts to non-criminals even.
Yes. And so they start using that to, I can get you off this case. Just say you've got a mental problem. And so,
or I'm screwing, I'm having a breakdown. Screw it. I can just go into the housing facility. And maybe, so what do you do? Maybe there should be that is a really interesting question. It's always complicated enough to figure out what the right fine tuning is for our society. But when you throw in what to do with mentally, and that I guess is the homeless, population. What do you do with these people?
Well, what I would say is the people that have the best chance of long-term integration in mental health issues is people who can get back in tune with their family. I mean, I have a little experience on this with a sister who had a car accident, had a brain injury, and she had a 30-year drug addiction to prescription drugs, and she just started going down with bigger and bigger on her brain injury. But I mean, I know it's hard. I know these people are difficult to deal with, and I know you can be estranged for a long period of time. But if you have a chance to come back and be a part, I mean, like my sister's end of her life, I was her guardian, and she lived in an assisted living facility. I mean, I don't think that happens for a lot of people, but her best probably 5 years was at the end of her life, living at a assisted living facility where she was on the welcome committee, and she was the cruise director for this assisted living facility, even with her brain injury. And, you know, they managed her medication so she couldn't get barbiturates. And so she ended up probably having the best time of her life, but nobody else in her family but me, or our family but me, really had anything to do with her because of the history. And so I would just challenge families. I know I've been through every bit of that, but if you can find your way to their best chance of making it through the system is with family involvement.
You know, whether you talk about criminals like we were talking about earlier, or mental health, it's the left and the right have different ways of looking at it. This is one of the takeaways from the lecture I listened to recently in psychology. And, you know, the left focuses on external causes, and the right focuses on accountability. And so for me, it's like, you got to have a bit of both, and you can't be on the fence about everything, obviously, but it's
well, but you know, the worst example I've seen is like Harris County. They would have somebody get simple release, you know, a personal bond, and then they would fail to appear, and they would get arrested, and they'd get simple release. And you know, there's multiple examples of people who failed to show up in the same case like 10 times, 15 times, 17 times. And they just kept getting released over and over and over again on the same personal bond. Well, that just throws accountability out the door, and it makes a mockery of the criminal justice system. I mean, if the judges are, well, I can't hold them. Well, I mean, I promise you, in these law and order counties, the next county, that those judges think they can. And so when you tell the public, oh, I can't hold them, and they can fail to appear for 17 times and I can't do anything to them, that's a lie. Because the cases, even in the O'Donnell cases, which is what they cite, that court said you can hold them accountable.
Interesting. It's a I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it's a kind of a high stakes showdown, and this is a tip of one of the many spears of the culture war. This is one of the tips.
Yeah, but you know what? One of the things I don't understand about that is, why is it that our friends on the left can't admit when something's not working? And so you see that all the time where, you know, Gronk says, well, there's really no statistical difference. No, there is a lot of difference in the type of release that people use, but they have figured out how to flood Google so that it appears like there's no difference. And that's the travesty. They are playing the system. They're gaming the system instead of trying to really improve it. And I don't really understand why that is.
That's not truth seeking, to say the least.
Yeah, yes, it's not. And so why would we do that?
That's face saving at the very least.
You know what I think it is these activist groups raise millions and millions of dollars from, you know, the billionaire class every year. And so they can't admit, you know, like there was an article from one of these groups in the Dallas Morning News where they were talking about their success rate. And so they actually told the reporter, and the reporter wrote it in her article, there is no trial court anywhere in the country who has not reviewed our arguments and found that the private bail system is unconstitutional. Well, that's probably a true statement, but what they left out is every court of appeals that has reviewed the trial court's decision has reversed. So they're leaving out that, oh, by the way, we overreached and the Court of Appeals reversed that case. Right. And so they make it sound like they're invincible. Right. And they're doing that because they're raising money and they're turning it into an industry. But the reality is, attorneys get sanctioned for not disclosing stuff like that, or they used to. But
Wow. Interesting times. Well, like I said, this is one of you're on the front lines of one of the battles. It's very interesting. It's a really relevant part of this national conversation of equity and culture and accountability. And so, who do you like for 2028?
Who for what?
Good question. Is president the most important office, the relevant office for your issue? Probably not.
No, states. I mean, bail is regulated by the
So,
states.
what's the most handful of races or one or two that's important coming up?
Well, I would say I would look, well, in Texas, I mean, what races we have. I mean, you know, we have two guys running for Senate, for the U.S. Senate. Cornyn, who is perceived as a moderate, and then the sitting Attorney General, Paxton, who is a darling of the right. So you've got a moderate versus a strong conservative in the primary, which is tomorrow, and is expected that they'll be in a runoff, and so probably a runoff in a Republican primary probably favors the conservative instead of the moderate. I mean, probably on both sides of the electorate. If you're a moderate, you're not going to win these days. I saw an article today where
in the general.
Yeah, but Cornyn's been so he's been a state senator. I mean, a U.S. senator for so long. I mean, Trump has not endorsed either candidate, and he loves Paxton. So that's probably the big race that we're watching. But I don't know if that would impact bail at the state level in Texas. You know, I think the legislature has strengthened bail for 2 or 3 sessions now. And so I don't think that there's a real risk to that. But I will say, you know, every year there's some bills that would just do substantial damage to the criminal justice system filed by our friends on the left every year. And they act like, you know, they're, you know, if this would improve the system, if we just gave everybody a personal bond for all misdemeanors, because, you know, it's just a misdemeanor. Well, isn't that what they're currently doing in California? And they have an 80% failure to appear rate statewide. And, you know, on top of that, they have a state statute that requires the cases have to be resolved within a certain time. And so if they fail to show up and they don't come back, well, then their case gets dismissed under that statute. And so, that's not strengthening the criminal justice system. That's just getting cases off the system. That's
really interesting. It's this dynamic between activists and their funders and the lawsuits and the judges and the attorneys.
Yes. And I would say when the O'Donnell suit came out, nobody really knew the arguments to make against what they were arguing. And I think now everybody does. And the Fifth Circuit has really closed out federal suits for bail reform. They've said they should not be filed, and the courts should decline to accept them. Now, I know that only applies to the Fifth Circuit, but I mean, that case went up to the Supreme Court and they declined to take it. And so it's like the third bail reform case they've declined to take. So I think that they're saying that, you know, they don't want to hear them. They don't want to hear those cases. So I think that we've gotten past the point where the activists were winning, and they're now losing in the federal courts, and they're usually losing at the legislature. Where they're having the most success right now is with the chief judges of the state Supreme Court, and then court rules enacting that. And so I think there's been a couple of examples of that happen.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. Wow. You took me deeper, I think, in some ways than I wanted to go into the law, you know, not practicing, you know, little like tremors, the horrors of the bar coming back. But, you know, had I, you know, gone into practice, I'm coming a year, I'm a couple years out of school now, but I'm only a year having been licensed, but there's no plans.
Oh, really?
But, yeah.
So, can you imagine? So I was a 4-year attorney when I argued my first case at the Supreme Court of Texas. And I went down the day before and I met with my client, because it wasn't my client. It was, you know, I was doing the appellate work for the firm, and I walked into a meeting with him and he looked at me. So this was 30 something years ago. And he looked at me and said, "You are not arguing my case at the Supreme Court of Texas. You are too young." And, you know, I need to be more shy at times, because I looked at him and I said, "Well, you got a problem, because I'm the only one prepared to argue your case tomorrow. So if it's not me, then there's nobody prepared." And so, I mean, it turned out really well. We won, but I mean, the Supreme Court has a reception after oral arguments. And so we went to the reception. He was there, and several of the clerks, the court clerks, came up to us and they were like, "Oh, you had the best argument today." And so that was really rewarding for that to be happening in front of my client. My client was like, "You paid them to say that?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." I slipped them a 20.
Wow. That's awesome. I got, that is amazing. The closest I got was in the second semester of the first year of school. I did the night program 4 years because I was working during the day. During the oral arguments, mock.
Sure.
It was a mock moot court experience, and there was one actual judge, 3 judges, and it was you versus the other person, and I was prepared, so I did have a sense of like I do have that competitor, like like if you put me in that environment, then I'm going to be more prepared. I'm going to be ready to go, and I killed it, and it was extremely thrilling, and I got to so. Yeah, that's cool. And so very cool that you're passionate. And so I guess you're passionate about, so it's great that you've been able to use that ability and talent and drive into something that you're passionate about.
We also had mock trials, mock arguments. So we, at the end of the second semester of law school for first years. And so I was in the finals of both competitions, both the moot court and the mock trial.
See,
we won.
That guy.
Yeah, we won one and we were second in the other. But what I will always remember from that is my parents. My parents were public school teachers and they've passed. But my dad was like the most proud parent you ever saw. And the first reception he came to, when it was time to leave, we couldn't find him. We could not find him. And then I saw
crying in the hallway.
I saw a group of people all laughing, surrounding, and I was like, please do not let my dad be in that group. He had cornered the visiting judge, which was the chief judge of the Austin Court of Appeals, and he was telling little Kenny stories to everybody when I got there. And I was like, I know you're proud, but please stop, please stop. And now I would pay probably a lot of money just to see him doing that now, since he's no longer here.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Yeah, no, that's great. It does bring back memories of school, and not to just be trading back and forth, but but okay, let's keep going. One more. Now, I was the guy that I did show up for one mock tryout, and I just wasn't a trier. I didn't give a shit.
No, I did all of that. I did all that.
I didn't make the cut. They sensed you don't give a shit. You're not engaged.
So my first semester, I was probably 50 percentile. My second semester, after all of that, finals of both competitions, I was top 10%. I did a national team every semester after that.
What clicked between the first and second semester?
Studying, like for a final. So my first semester, I didn't know how to study. I always did really well after the first test. Well, in law school, the first test is the final. And so my second semester, I figured out how to study, and I outlined the entire class. And so I would make it an anagram story based upon the first letter of each line of the outline. And then the way I would remember it is I would make the story as filthy dirty as I could. And then, so the first 10 minutes of the final, I would write out my outline, and then I would use that to answer all the questions. And so it went from top 50% to top 10, was on law review, was national teams. Our brief was best in the nation in one competition. So was very lucky, very, very lucky, because I'm just a hick from the sticks, No,
it's not just lucky. It's not just lucky by any stretch. And that's what, that's like the Herculean effort that it took me to pass the bar. That's what people like you put into everything once you starting from the second semester. And God bless you guys. You guys are the difference maker. You guys are the people that they talked about in the freshman year orientation, where say, go be the difference maker. That's what an attorney is, right? An advocate.
Yeah.
So you're in it.
Well, and I will say this. So this is a thing for you to be when you get really into your practice, figure out your area of law. I became an expert on Supreme Court cases and argued my first case within 4 years. And the way I did it was I started reading every case published by the Supreme Court and I would make a list of issues that they were trending. And so then when we would go to trial, I would see if I could preserve an issue that was on the list. And so when we were doing medical malpractice, we went to a seminar on new and important cases from the appellate courts. There were 6 cases. 3 of them were mine because I would analyze all the cases issued by the Supreme Court, and then I would look at trends, and then I would try to preserve an issue to go up.
What do you mean by preserve an issue to go up?
So if they were looking at evidentiary issues, then I would make sure that one of our issues was in the same area. If we were dealing with experts on a medical malpractice case, then I would try to preserve that issue. I mean, make it just the same issue. Or if they reserved an issue for another day, I would try to make it the issue I preserved to go up on appeal to be squarely in that area, so that if we lost, then we would be able to go up on appeal. We were always very lucky. I think we were undefeated for our trial team on medical malpractice, but even on court TV. But I did have some condemnation cases where we got screwed by the trial court, went up, reversed him, came back down, got screwed by the trial court, went up, reversed him, and finally the third time it came down, they settled with us.
It is really amazing the difference one person can make with
Mm-hmm.
just that desire to just make a spreadsheet and trace something. And wow, so that is a testimony to our system, and it's got me going, oh, I love our system. There we go.
Well, but I think it's also a testament that, even a podunk person like me from Gorman, Texas, the peanut capital of the Southwest, where, they didn't train kids to go to college. They can train them to be farmers. I mean, if I can do it, and I used to say this all the time, if I can do it, then anyone can do it. Now, I had a drive, and I think a lot of people you got to have a drive. And, I was told one time I have a classic drive to want to prove to my parents that I'm worthy of their love because I wasn't the favorite. But so I was a workaholic for many years. So I was older when I got married. And so, but
interesting.
Again, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I promise you.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Ken. It's really been a pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you. I can't believe how late it is, but it's been a great conversation.
When we get into it, it's really good. It's got me thinking. So, really interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.